Hi everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update here on social media. Thanks for joining us this busy week. There's been a lot going on, more developments about the conduct of the FBI and Justice Department and maybe even President Obama during the Russia and Clinton email investigations. Also a new lawsuit from Judicial Watch on the Comey book deal. And we have new information or a new lawsuit about Trump travel costs that I'll brief you about. But first, I think it's important to talk about the accountability efforts that Judicial Watch is undertaking to make sure that powerful government officials like James Comey and Robert Mueller and the Justice Department and the FBI, all the folks there, are held accountable to the rule of law. What we do is we ask questions about issues that are important, like the Comey book deal, like other things like the dossier, like the FISA warrants, and we sue for records when we don't get answers to these questions. And we sue using the Freedom of Information Act. And along those lines, we were asking about documents about James Comey and his book deal. Now, James Comey, as you know, is the former FBI director fired by President Trump last year. He leaked documents or information from his Comey memos, as they're called, to the New York Times to get a special counsel appointed to target President Trump. That's not my characterization. I'm almost quoting his testimony verbatim to the Senate Intelligence Committee. So we're obviously very interested in why James Comey had a vendetta against President Trump and whether he carried his obviously distaste for President Trump with him while he was FBI director. Now, the problem that Comey has is he took these Comey memos out with him from the FBI, and as I said, leaked them. It turns out some of them may have had classified information. We're not sure if any of that material was leaked, but he certainly wasn't allowed to take any information, let alone classified information, away from the agency. Reminds me of what Hillary Clinton did and should have been prosecuted for. But also, he also is signed on to a major book deal. The book is coming out soon, but it's supposedly on ethical leadership, which I guess is ironic, given the conduct of his top agency officials that we've uncovered since then. He received $2 million for the book. And typically, when you are a senior government official like him, you're supposed to submit that proposal or his proposed book draft to his agency, in this case the FBI, to make sure he's not saying anything improper, meaning revealing classified or other sensitive information that the government doesn't want released. So we want to know what's going on there. Now, we have experience, and we've seen publicly about others who are whistleblowers who have been really hamstrung by this review process. You may know Tony Shaffer. I think they shredded during the Obama administration 10,000 copies of his book, the Pentagon did, after giving him the runaround of what he could publish and what he couldn't publish. So we want to know if James Comey had any special deals with his allies in the FBI to get around this review procedure, especially given the fact that he was already allowed to steal records from the FBI and then leak them to the New York Times without any legal consequence. So that's why we've asked for the records, and we've been given the stonewall again by the Justice Department and FBI for these records. And we've also asked about this testimony I've talked about, the coordination between the FBI and Mr. Comey on his testimony. We've already sued the Justice Department for coordination it might have had with Comey on this testimony. You may remember the testimony he talked about wanting to get a special counsel to target Trump, and it was very controversial. Now, if the FBI and Justice Department, and then in this case Robert Mueller, unleashed him and coordinated with him, I think that public has a right to know that, and it would be certainly a scandal of the highest order if the agencies were working with James Comey to target Donald Trump in this testimony. So these are why we're suing for these records. Judicial Watch doesn't just rely on the media to leak the information out to the American people. We don't rely on Congress, who is always fighting or sometimes fighting for this information and can't get it, or it's withheld and they don't do anything about it. We do it ourselves. So this is why we sue in federal court for these records. And Judicial Watch has more lawsuits on these issues than anyone else, I can guarantee you. Now, do I know it for a fact? No. But I know we have at least 26 lawsuits on Russia, Comey, Mueller, all that universe of issues, leaking, unmasking, FISAs, dossiers, you name it, we have it covered. And we've been getting a stonewall from these deep state controlled agencies about most of these inquiries that we've been having to pursue in court because we've been getting the stonewall. On Comey alone, we have 2 lawsuits about his memos. We have a lawsuit about the metadata associated with the creation of his documents, because some people think, I think quite fairly and not cynically, that the memos were written after the fact and not when he said he wrote them. These are about the memos he supposedly wrote after his various meetings with President Trump. And we also have, also tied to this this book issue, a request and a lawsuit for documents about how he accounted for classified information he may have had in his person, and the protection and the dissemination of those records. There's a big problem when you have the FBI director walk out of his agency after he's fired with classified information. How do we know there was classified information? Because of Judicial Watch lawsuits. We sued the FBI for the Comey memos. We sued specifically for the Flynn memo that was famously leaked in part to the New York Times. We're representing the Daily Caller News Foundation that sued for all the memos. There were others that are suing for the memos too, also in this case, including, I think, CNN. And unfortunately, the court just told us we can't get the memos. You may recall a few weeks ago I told you, because I thought it was an important development, and we had encouraged the court to do this, the court in this case took the memos and read them, or wanted to read them himself to see if they could be released. And it turns out he thought they didn't. I don't buy that decision. The court issued the decision, I think, last week. And he also said he met in secret, behind closed doors. We weren't able to attend the meeting, with the representative for Robert Mueller's operation, who also convinced him to keep these memos secret. Now, what's the legal issue here is James Comey wrote these memos as CYA memos to paper the record in his jihad against Donald Trump. I have no doubt that was the case. He gets fired. He leaks the information that he took improperly to get Mueller appointed. Then they go back and they take the memos from wherever they were in the FBI, and Mueller has them, and he's now investigating supposedly Donald Trump for obstruction related to the Comey firing. And therefore we're not allowed to see them because they're law enforcement sensitive, among other things. They're part of his investigation. Obviously that can't be the case. If that were the case, every government file that potentially gets vacuumed up in criminal investigations subsequently can never be seen by the American people. Typically under the law, unless the record is created as part of a law enforcement investigation, is it protected as part of a law enforcement investigation? The fact that a law enforcement investigator was subsequently interested in a government document isn't a reason to keep it secret. So needless to say, we disagree with the court. We're appealing it on our behalf and on behalf of the Daily Caller. But it's unfortunate that we've had to battle the Justice Department and the FBI and the Mueller team, who the Justice Department is going to bat for, on these Comey memos. They're protecting James Comey, which leads us to question whether they're protecting him on the book deal, and whether they coordinated improperly with him on the anti-Trump Senate testimony I talked about. And it's Judicial Watch doing this aggressive legwork and asking these tough questions, and we're willing to go to federal court, thanks to your support, to do it. So there's no one else doing that type of work as comprehensively as Judicial Watch is. Any issue that you're concerned about related to Russia, you can bet we either have a FOIA request for or a lawsuit. Now, the stonewalling is significant because when the federal government comes in and says, we don't want to give Judicial Watch information because it's classified, or it's potentially so sensitive that we can't even admit or deny they have the records, the courts are, in this case, in many cases, overly deferential to the government. And so it's important that there be this commitment to transparency by the administration generally, because it just serves this secrecy to protect the really illicit machinations to target and remove President Trump from office. And it's doing nothing to advance the interests of the American people who want the information on the dossier, who want the information on the FISA applications. Now, for instance, we sued for the dossier information, the background information, whether there were payments. We've been asking questions about that for a long time. We've been in federal court. We had significant briefing on it. And the government's position is we can't give Judicial Watch anything here. We can't even confirm or deny anything exists. Now, we all know the dossier exists. We all know about the back and forth with Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS. And it turns out it's even worse than that. And they come in and tell the court, no, we can't confirm or deny it exists. And we said, well, hold on a second. The president confirmed it in a tweet, and the court just ruled that's not even good enough. So we're going to go back to the court in some way, either appeal it or go directly back to the court, especially given all the news about the dossier in the memo that was authorized for release by the President of the United States, to at least get the government to admit and get the court to cast aside the government's dishonest efforts to not confirm or deny the dossier exists. Now, again, going back, why is this secrecy so important? We're not asking for classified information. We don't want legitimately classified information. The government's position is that everything in the file should be classified, more or less, and talking about the Russia file. And obviously that can't be the case. We saw that with the memo. They were screaming about why that information needed to be classified. It didn't need to be classified. And of course you can declassify material. And by keeping this secret, you are protecting those who are abusing the FBI and Justice Department and the other agencies to target and spy on the Trump team in terms of the FISA, as I said, the unmaskings, the leaking of classified information. So that's what's exceedingly frustrating here. And I've advised the White House directly, and I've said it publicly, we need extreme transparency on this Russia issue. We should have a transparency initiative administration-wide to declassify and release this information to the American people so they can find out about the government corruption, evidently, that was behind the targeting of Donald Trump. Government corruption that has been unmatched in recent history by all accounts. And right now the deep state is controlling the transparency here, or the secrecy and the stonewalling. And I'd recommend the White House intervene directly to release this, as they did with the Nunes memo. If the deep state had its way, we would never know about the Nunes memo and the big lies behind the dossier and the corruption of the FISA court process. And they have a lot to hide. Everything is collapsing around them. That's the big news this week. It began with the Nunes memo. It's been slowly but surely, but it culminated in many ways with the Nunes memo, and it's just gotten worse and worse. The Russia collusion story is collapsing. There was no Trump-Russia collusion. The only evidence for it was spurious allegations created by Clinton campaign vendors, Fusion GPS, and this foreign national spy Steele. That's the only basis for it. Don't be distracted by anything else, and it's collapsing. So the news about this Democratic memo coming out, which is the counter to the Nunes memo that the Democrats created after they failed to obstruct the release of the information, so they thought, well, maybe we should put our spin on it. That's going to be terrible for the Democrats, because it's going to remind us that it was their party that funded the dossier that was behind the Trump spying, brought to the Trump warrant, this targeting Carter Page. But there were other things that the dossier was used for to target the Trump people with. So I'm very interested to see this Democratic memo that talks about a Democratic-funded dossier, paid for with Democratic funds, as I said, the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, used by a Democratic administration to go after the opposition to the Democratic candidate. I'm very interested to know in that memo. What's in it? I'm interested to see the defense. As I said last week, we found there was another dossier, this one created by the Kerry State Department, targeting Donald Trump. They gathered information and sent it over to one of their buddies in the United States Senate, classified information on Russia. They vacuumed it up the last days of the administration to target Trump. And now in the paper today, I think, there's a Obama State Department official who admits that he was talking to not only Steele, but Sidney Blumenthal, Clinton Foundation guy, Clinton henchman, hatchet man, whatever you want to call him, regular email correspondent with Hillary Clinton that Judicial Watch uncovered in all the Clinton emails. Constant. Blumenthal sent Hillary Clinton a dossier, it looks like every week. It's no surprise he was helping out on this dossier effort targeting real President Trump. I keep on calling him by his Twitter handle, Real Donald Trump. We have a FOIA for the State Department on the Steele communications, the dossier communications. So we'll see what that uncovers. All of that's collapsing. And what's being exposed is now the President Obama's maybe direct involvement in all of this. Now, one of the interesting things, and this is the dishonest liberal media, they've kept President Obama out of this. You would have thought the FBI and Justice Department had nothing to do with the Obama administration in 2016. Well, actually, it was run by his appointees. James Comey is an Obama appointee. Loretta Lynch is an Obama appointee. The head of the CIA, Obama appointee. The head of the NSA, Obama appointee. But President Obama is never mentioned. He's raising money for Hillary Clinton, going out and campaigning for her in a way that no president has done in 100 years. Again, no president has done what Obama did for Hillary Clinton in terms of personal political support and campaign support. There's been nothing comparable done in 100 years. But we're not allowed to ask questions about what he knew and when about the dossier. Now we have good basis to ask these questions, even more because of text messages released by Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, who has one of the oversight committees in the Senate, where Strzok and Page, the anti-Trump FBI agents at the center of both the Clinton email and Russia investigations, are saying I think it's Strzok who writes, I need to prepare, I'm paraphrasing, the texts are out there for you to review. I'm preparing talking points for Comey's briefing with President Obama. He wants to know everything. Now, Johnson interpreted the text as wanting to know everything about the Clinton investigation. So the defenders, I just love the defenders because they make it worse for those they're defending, say, no, that was probably about the Russia investigation. Oh, well, isn't that interesting? So President Obama wanted to know everything there was to know about the Russia investigation. Did that include the Russia dossier, funded with his party money? The unmasking of Trump associates? All the other abuses that were taking place? And what's even more interesting, the president is talking to James Comey about an intelligence investigation and maybe even a criminal investigation concerning Russia. Wow. So President Trump talks to James Comey about investigations, and he gets a special counsel appointed, but there's no special counsel investigating Obama? Now, I'm one who believes presidents have a right to talk to FBI directors and Justice Department officials about investigations and intelligence operations and express their views. And if there's no corruption involved in their interest, that's fine. But only President Trump gets targeted, but not President Obama, who was obviously interested either in well, we know he was interested in the Clinton email investigation because he publicly kept on saying she didn't do anything wrong even before the FBI had concluded, well, we know why the FBI concluded its sham investigation, because it was taking orders from Obama, who was giving his impression as to what should be done on TV every day. So I want to know, what did President Obama know about the dossier? I want to know, I see Vice President Biden's out there. What did he know about the dossier? I see Eric Holder's back out there. I want to know what he knew about Uranium One and the Russia effort that the Justice Department knew about to give money to the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton cash machine in order to get a favorable ruling from the administration on Uranium One. And you would think the Democrats would be sensitive about colluding with Russians or Russian fronts to target Trump. Well, it turns out the Senate Democrat Mark Warner, who's the number 2 on the Intelligence Committee, or excuse me, the minority leader or ranking member on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate. So the Republicans run the Intelligence Committee, they have the majority. I think Senator Burr is the majority leader, but you wouldn't know it the way the committee's being run because it seems to be run by the Democrats, and Mark Warner is the ranking. And it looks like, based on reports, he was texting with the lawyer for a Russia oligarch, and a lawyer who used to represent, I think, the Russian foreign minister, about how to get into contact with Steele. And he was doing it in a secret way. Obviously, he didn't want anyone knowing what he was doing. So you have a Democrat senator talking to a Russia front guy, a registered lobbyist, on how to get their friend Steele in, or their witness Steele in. And this is desperate times. This is why, for the left that is focused so much and invested so much in abusing the rule of law to target President Trump, the whole thing is collapsing. That's why you hear about figures like Papadopoulos and Carter Page and people who obviously had nothing to do with Russia collusion as defined by the left with President Trump. Why is Mueller still pursuing this investigation? And why hasn't he been asked about what he knew and when about the dossier? So we're in court asking for the records. We're being stonewalled in our request for the records, and I would encourage those responsible officials, whether they be in the White House, the FBI, the CIA, NSA, you name it, Justice Department especially, to start erring on the side of transparency. Because the cover-up is helping the perps in this Russia-Obamagate scandal. Now, we don't just ask questions about, I know a lot of you are conservative out there, and many of you probably vote Republican, but we ask questions about what politicians do, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And to that end, we've been asking questions about the cost of President Trump's travel. Now, everyone will say, what about President Obama's travel? Let me put it this way. Anything you know about President Obama's travel is a result of Judicial Watch lawsuits. And we've documented his personal and unnecessary travel was up at $114 million. Up to date now, the numbers we have for President Trump along those lines is, what is the number? About $13 million. So I guess it's comparable more or less if you average it out over 8 years. Now the problem we're having, and it doesn't really go to whether the travel is necessary or unnecessary or whatever, is that the Secret Service is a disaster in terms of transparency. During the Obama administration, they used to be relatively cooperative. They give us the documents about the cost of travel. And we don't get all the costs, obviously, but at least we get the expenses that are easily detailed, like car rental, hotel expenses, and things like that, per diems, meal expenses. And those numbers add up. That's why we asked for them. And for whatever reason, the Obama administration, I guess they didn't like the press that they were getting about the cost of President Obama's travel. They just stopped giving us the information. And we had to sue for over 19 requests that they had simply ignored. simply ignored. And the same has just happened with the Secret Service under President Trump. Obviously, that agency is dysfunctional in many ways, and it's concerning. We just had to ask Sue for 9, can you believe it, 9 trips. So we had 9 different requests, and they've ignored us on all of those. Now you're saying, well, what, give them a chance. No, that's not the way it works. We've given them plenty of time. This is months. We've asked for this. We asked for these records back in the middle of last year. We still hadn't gotten responses. Now the Pentagon, they typically give us responses when we ask for Air Force One travel information. But we're not getting it from the Secret Service. And this to me is an indication of something is amiss at the Secret Service. And if you follow the issue of the Secret Service and its leadership problems, and some of the scandals at the top there, you have to wonder whether that agency needs top to bottom reform. If you can't get basic information, basic issues like this, transparency, we're not asking for anything secretive or anything that would harm the president's security. We're asking for hotel bills, expense reports. Not a big deal in terms of FOIA. And they can't even get that right. It's really troubling. So we'll be tracking this information, and it's unfortunate we've got to go to federal court to get this basic information. And what a waste of resources by the government. Because we're going to get it, I think, eventually. But the only way we do it is by going to court. And obviously, these are things that we don't necessarily want to have to do. We don't want to sue if we can just get the records directly. But the fact that we have to sue repeatedly for this type of information does not reflect well on the Secret Service that we rely on to protect the president and other important people here in Washington, D.C. So with that, thanks for joining us this week on our weekly update here on Judicial Watch, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Stay tuned on this channel or YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all that, because we have other great Judicial Watch videos with other Judicial Watch reps and updates on cases throughout the week. So it's not just the weekly update, but there are other great videos that we post as well. So be sure to follow those, and be sure to go to our website and read about these lawsuits that I'm talking about. You can look at the documents we've been getting. You can look at the background information as well, and share that with your friends and family, and get the word out about our efforts to hold the government to account. So with that and the train, I'm signing off. Have a good week.